We have been told that there is this 7-year period. We've always called it the 7 years of tribulation. But where does the Bible actually say that? Will we know when the 7 years starts? Because most of us have read the Left Behind series, and we know that, they say the rapture will happen, and then all these things and crashing and planes crashing and all that. But is that actually true? Is that what the Bible tells us is going to start off this 7-year period? What should we be looking out for? Join us today as Joel Richardson answers that question for us. We've heard of a final 7-year period, often called the 7 years of tribulation. What scriptures speak about these 7 years? So where does this even come from?
Sure. So then Jesus, this is what's called intertextuality, which is to say these guys understood each other, they studied each other. Gabriel, the book of Daniel, was familiar with Isaiah and Jeremiah. Jesus was familiar with all of them, and he was expounding upon what had already been made clear by the prophets. So as he's sitting on the Mount of Olives, his disciples say, tell us about these things. Tell us about the end times. Tell us about your coming. And so he gives what's called the Olivet Discourse, because it's on the Mount of Olives. It's just Jesus' sermon on the end times. Okay, so in skipping forward in verse 15 and 21, Jesus says this: when you see something called the abomination that causes desolation, and he says that was spoken of by Daniel the prophet. We're going to talk more about this. So again, he's alluding directly back to Daniel. He says, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Get out of Judea, leave Jerusalem. Whoever's in the housetop, don't go back, grab your iPad, your iPhone, just get out. For then there will be a great tribulation. And he almost directly quotes Gabriel, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will be. Jesus uses the phrase great tribulation, but he's drawing from the language of the great day of the Lord, the time of distress, the time of Jacob's distress. Okay, so now we understand where the concept of the Great Tribulation comes from, and really what it means to those who are biblically literate, right? Who understand Isaiah and Jeremiah and so forth. You can see here how Jesus is almost directly quoting Gabriel. In Daniel 12, we saw how Gabriel is directly alluding to Isaiah and Jeremiah. And so here's another timeline. It's real simple. The Great Tribulation, the time of distress, is likened to the travails of labor, which leads to the resurrection of the dead. The analogy is that's the birth, which leads to the age of redemption. Okay, so it's actually, initially it can be a little bit complicated and so forth, but the basic storyline, the basic timeline is actually fairly straightforward and pretty simple.
So from there, once we get that piece of it, then we go to the question 3, where does the Bible specifically say that this is going to last 7 years? Because we keep hearing the 7 years of tribulation. So where does it say that?
Yeah, so actually I'll buzz through this one much quicker. So the concept is found in both Daniel and Revelation. So really the foundational text is Daniel chapter 9. This is one of the most involved, complex prophecies in the Bible. It's referred to as the prophecy of 70 weeks. So it's a very involved prophecy. We don't have time to really hash through it all in great detail, but all of chapter 9 in Daniel, this is the definitive prophecy that gives us a time frame for the end times. And so I'll actually, I've got it laid out. So it's 4 verses at the end of Daniel 9 are really the critical verses. I'll read through these. 70 weeks, so here's this angelic messenger is speaking this to Daniel.
What is a week?
And a week is a period of 7. In the Hebrew, it's Shavua, or if weeks is Shavuot. 70 weeks, but now, so the Hebrews counted not just weeks. We count weeks in 7 days. They also counted decades or, cycles of, they counted years in 7s as well. We have cycles of 10 years. We call it a decade, but our weeks are 7 days. So the Hebrews had both days and years. So he says 70 Shavuot, 70 weeks. These are cycles of 7 years have been decreed. They've been set apart for your people. And then he lists the things that will be accomplished within this period of 70 times 7 years. Finish transgression, to make an end to sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. So you are to know and discern that he has a very specific time marker, from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. So again, Daniel's in Babylon. This is before Israel returns, before the Israelites, the Hebrews, returned back to the land and began rebuilding after the Babylonian exile. And he says, from the time that there's this decree to rebuild and restore Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That's a total of 69 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Then, after the 62 weeks, which is again the 7 and the 62, so after the 69 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. This is one of the most incredible messianic prophecies in the Bible. Various people have calculated this to go, man, and it comes out right from the time of the issuing of the decree to the coming and the cutting off, the crucifixion of Jesus. And then it gets a little cryptic. He says, the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. That's Jerusalem and the temple. So there's this people of the prince. So this is referring to the Antichrist. There's a lot of different debates and theories as to who this is, but just to make time short, it's referring to the Antichrist. And its end will come with a flood. Even to the end, there will be war. There will be wars right up until the very end. Desolations are determined. And then here he says of the Antichrist, he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. That's one period of 7 years. So the Antichrist will make a covenant. Some translations, it's a little bit ambiguous. The Hebrew translations say he will strengthen a covenant. Either he'll make a strong covenant or he'll strengthen a pre-existing covenant for a period of 7 years. But in the middle of that 7-year period, in the middle of the week, he'll put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering in the temple. And on a wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until the complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate. That's the Antichrist. Now this is the part I'm just going to buzz through. So first we have Daniel lays this, again, foundational prophecy that at the end of the age, so you've got this period where Jesus is cut off, but then he goes, but then there's this final week, this final period of 7 years where the Antichrist comes, he destroys the city and the sanctuary, he sets up the abomination that causes desolation in the temple, but then he is cut off. So this leads to the return of Jesus. And then throughout Daniel, you have multiple references to half of this week. So in Daniel 7:25, he's talking about the Antichrist. He says he will speak out against the Most High, wear down the saints. He'll change times and seasons. The saints will be given into his hand for a time. That's a year. Times, that's 2 years. Half a time, 3.5 years. So again, back in Daniel, he said in the middle of the week. That's when the Antichrist pulls all these shenanigans. And so then you have the final 3.5 years, that's half of the week, that the Antichrist will wreak all of this havoc. In Daniel 12, you have a similar reference. He says it would be for times, and half a time. Daniel 12, you have references to roughly 3.5 years, 1,290 days. You've got another time, an extra 45 days, 1,335 days. Revelation 11 speaks of 1,260 days. Again, Daniel uses 360-day years. We have 365-day years. They add an intercalary month every now and then. That's kind of technical. But so 1,260 days, that's 3.5 years. Revelation 12:2, he says 42 months. Again, that's 3.5 years. Revelation 12:14, for a time, times, and half a time. So these are all eschatological end-time references, multiple different ways. They talk 1,260 days, times, and half a time, 42 months, all sorts of different ways. They highlight this period of 3.5 years. So there's a real solid foundation, biblical foundation for this concept. It's not some fringy, weird idea, this 7-year period. And the Bible does tie it to this final period in the last days. Now, to be real specific, I'm not sure if I include that here. Yeah, there's Revelation 13:5. So multiple references, 42 months. Yeah, we'll talk about it later. But essentially, to be real technical and specific, the Great Tribulation is not this whole 7-year period. It's only the last 3.5 years. It's very popular to say that the whole 7-year period is the Great Tribulation, but Scripture actually specifies that it's actually from the middle point of the week until the return of Jesus.
Right. And that's what we wanted. We wanted to get a foundation first to say, okay, where does the Bible even talk about this 7-year period? And so now we know there's going to be one. The Antichrist will come on the scene. We're going to go through all of that. We're just trying to take it step by step if you're kind of wondering. Let's just go to question number 5, because I think you probably covered that.
Yeah.
What needs to happen to kick off these 7 years, and what should we be looking out for? Because we're just sitting back and we're watching the news. As Christians, we should know what's going to kick this whole thing off.
Yeah. So obviously when people go, how do you really know that we're in the end times? You can talk about general things, because sometimes people will be like, look, these things are cyclical, like we vote in a conservative, then we vote in a liberal. It just goes back and forth. And I can go, guys, there are doors that we've opened that we're not going to shut. The whole transgenderism and all that, yeah, things could pull back a little bit, but 30% of Gen Zs today say they're either gay or bisexual. And that includes Christian kids. The polls done in churches, 30% will say that. We're not gonna, I'm praying for revival in the United States. I'm just saying there are doors that we've opened that are never gonna shut. The tsunami of pornography, it's not going to go away. It's not just we're just going to go back to the 1950s. Technology, we're not going to turn back the door on technology. So there's all kinds of different general things that we can talk about. But and these are all, again, general signs in culture and society and this type of thing. But when we look at the biblical, but you say, but what does the Bible say? What are the primary signs in the Bible that we should be looking for? The main issue that will kick the 7 years off, again, is going back to Daniel 9. The Antichrist will make this covenant with the many, which is referring to Israel, for 1 week. It clearly revolves around Israel. It revolves around Jerusalem. And then I've just included here just a handful of different translations so you can see, again, the slight ambiguity with the Hebrew. So the NASB says he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 Shavua, for that 1 week. The ESV says he shall make a strong covenant. The NIV says he shall confirm a covenant. So some say he will confirm or sort of, reestablish a previously existing covenant, and there's a lot of discussions in terms of what that covenant is, but the point is this, and I want to say this, some of what I'm saying here is slightly speculative, but in all likelihood, it will be some type of security agreement. People often talk of a peace treaty. It could be a peace treaty. It could be just some type of a regional agreement, and these things are just so normal in the Middle East with Israel and her security challenges. My guess is, and I want to be clear, I'm speculating, but I think there's some pretty good biblical reasons as well as just on-the-ground reality, geopolitical reasons for seeing this. It'll be some type of an agreement with Israel that revolves around guaranteeing security with her neighbors. We'll make sure that, Iran doesn't wipe you off the map. But we're going to share Jerusalem. We're going to share the land. We're going to have a 2-state solution. We're going to finally settle this ongoing conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis. We're going to make Jerusalem the global capital of world peace, where Jews, Muslims, and Christians can all worship together. The Bible is clear, which we'll talk about, that there will be some type of a temple will be rebuilt, that sacrifices will be established, so this making of the covenant will revolve around that. And then, as Daniel says, but in the middle of the week, he breaks the covenant and he abolishes the sacrifices that will take place again in Jerusalem. So this is really probably the next major biblical sign to watch for, is this massive 7-year treaty, agreement, whatever it might be. We don't know specifically, but there will be someone who will emerge that will have enough political capital to gain the trust of Israel, at least to enter into some type of political negotiations with him. And there'll probably be all kinds of fanfare, woohoo, we finally achieved peace in the Middle East, or something along these lines. So that's, loosely, again, with some speculation on my part, that's loosely what we're looking for next.
And we talked a lot. We talked about the Antichrist. We'll get to him eventually, but the Bible does say in Micah, we talked about this morning, that he is an Assyrian. So it seems most likely he will come from, like Islamic Antichrist, your book, most likely around Turkey-ish, that whole area up there. So what we need to be looking for then is someone in that area specifically that's come on the scene. Now, as Christians, are we going to be able to look at the news and be like, all right, now we know the leader of Turkey is really the Antichrist? Like, how's it going to fit for us that are watching the news?
So I think the idea that we'll all agree is just based on our track record is probably pretty silly. In other words, we can never agree on anything. So in other words, like when the Antichrist emerges, will we all be like, oh, this is him? I doubt it. But I think those that are really paying attention, that are humbly studying the Scriptures, looking at the signs, I think the Lord will give us discernment. I'm sure there'll still be plenty of controversy and debate and so forth. We'll touch on this more, but the Scriptures are pretty emphatic in terms of the general region that the Antichrist will come from. I sometimes joke and call it the tri-state area, which is basically Turkey, Syria, Iraq, that sort of part of the world. Micah chapter 5 does refer to the Antichrist as the Assyrian. There's multiple other passages that frame him as coming from that part of the world. Ezekiel refers to him as Gog from the land of Magog, which is Turkey. It's not Russia, by the way. In Ezekiel's day, it was clearly Asia Minor. So I think if we're paying attention, that we'll probably have some clarity there. On the other hand, the Scripture says that it's not until the middle of the week when he breaks the covenant and sets up the abomination that causes desolation. That's when it says the Antichrist is, the word in the Greek is apocalypsis. That's when he's revealed. So that's when there should be no more debate. That's when we go, this is the man, this is the Antichrist, who is clearly Kamala Harris. But so, just to be clear, I always have to throw in a joke.
He does. He always does. He puts up pictures.
Hillary Clinton is so passe. Kamala
there might be Democrats in here, so just that.
It's all right. So she is the son of perdition, the man of lawlessness. Who are you to say she can't be? So I'm just joking. So
he has a really dry sense of humor. He told me a joke this morning. It took me all day. I finally came here tonight, and I'm like, I still don't get your joke, and he had to explain it to me. So this is Joel.
That's how you know a joke is not successful, when you have to explain it 4 hours later. So in any case, I think the Lord will give His people discernment. But the idea that we'll all agree, that's also probably a pipe dream as well.
So, and the first 3.5 years, I think, as we'll talk about, I don't think it's going to be like the Left Behind series. I think we've all been taught, if you read the Left Behind, you're just like, oh my gosh, everything's going to end. And I don't think it's really going to be like that. Okay, I hope that was really, really helpful to you. I'm going to put a link to this entire conference below, so if you want to get ahead of the game on that, you can do that. If you want to know more about Joel, go to joelstrumpet.com. He has lots of end time videos that you can watch to get knowledgeable about this. So, all right, have a good day, and we will see you next week.